The knife was meant to cut her wedding cake. Instead, Elara used it to slice through her bedroom window screen, her white gown billowing behind her like a ghost fleeing its own funeral. The satin caught on the splintered frame, and she heard it tear, a sound that should have made her wince, given how many months her father had indebted the pack to pay for this dress. But Elara Vance was done caring about debts. Done caring about the expectations of a pack that had written her off as defective the day she turned 18 and failed to shift. 5 years later, nothing had changed. She was still the cursed Omega. Still wolfless. Still worthless. And in 3 hours, she would become Marcus Thorne's wife. She dropped into the rosebushes below her window, thorns biting through the delicate fabric and into her skin. The pain barely registered. She'd learned to compartmentalize pain years ago. It was the only way to survive in Silver Creek. The forest loomed ahead, ancient pines standing sentinel against a sky bruised purple with approaching dusk. Behind her, the pack house hummed with wedding preparations. She could hear the clatter of dishes, the barked orders of the head Omega, the heavy footsteps of the guards Marcus had stationed around the perimeter. Not to keep intruders out, she'd realized. To keep her in. Elara gathered her ruined skirts and ran. She'd been planning this for 3 days, ever since she'd pressed her ear to the crack in Marcus's study door and heard him speaking with his beta. The Omega's young enough, Marcus had said, his voice carrying that oily satisfaction that made her skin crawl. Should be able to breed for a decade at least, even without a wolf. And if she can't produce an heir, the beta asked. A long pause. Then, almost lazily, then she'll meet the same fate as the first one. Tragic accident. Very sad. These fragile Omegas, you know how it is. The beta had laughed. Elara had bitten through her lip to keep from screaming. Marcus Thorne was 53 years old, a widower twice over, and he smelled like stale cigars and rotting ambition. Her father had sold her to him for the price of his gambling debts, a transaction conducted over brandy while Elara served them tea, invisible and voiceless, as Omegas were expected to be. No one had asked her opinion. No one ever did. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed she was too beaten, too broken, too defective to fight back. The forest swallowed her whole. Elara ran until her lungs burned, until the white gown was more brown than ivory, until she could no longer hear the distant sounds of the pack house. The trees grew thicker here, older, their branches weaving together overhead to block out the fading light. She had no plan beyond escape. No money, no supplies, no wolf to help her survive in the wilderness. Rogues prowled these woods, wolves without packs, driven mad by isolation. And if Marcus's guards caught her, death would be the kindest punishment she could expect. Still, she ran. The sound reached her first, wheels creaking, horses snorting, the low murmur of male voices. Elara skidded to a halt, pressing herself against a massive oak, her heart hammering so loud she was certain they could hear it. Through the trees, she glimpsed them. A convoy of black wagons, at least a dozen, each one larger and more ornate than anything she'd ever seen. The horses were massive war beasts, their coats gleaming like polished obsidian. Armed guards flanked the procession, their armor bearing an emblem that made Elara's breath catch. A wolf's head crowned in silver thorns. The royal crest of the Blackwood dynasty. Alpha King Kalen. Everyone knew the stories. The youngest Alpha King in 5 generations, who had united the fractured territories through a combination of brilliant strategy and brutal force. They said he'd killed his own father to take the throne. They said his wolf was a monster, twice the size of any natural shifter. They said he was so powerful that lesser wolves couldn't even meet his eyes without submitting. They said a lot of things about Kalen Blackwood. None of them good. The convoy was passing through Silver Creek territory on some diplomatic mission. She'd heard Marcus complaining about having to provide provisions and safe passage. The aging Alpha had been furious about the imposition, though he'd hidden it well during the royal inspection 2 days ago. Elara watched the wagons roll past, her mind racing. If she could hide in one of them, she could escape Silver Creek entirely. By the time anyone realized she was gone, she'd be miles away, in territory where Marcus had no authority. It was insane. It was suicide. Trespassing in a royal convoy carried an automatic death sentence. But so did staying. The last wagon in the procession was a supply cart, piled high with provisions and covered in heavy furs. The guard's attention was focused ahead, on the road, not on the seemingly insignificant cargo bringing up the rear. Elara didn't let herself think. She just moved. She burst from the tree-line, her ruined gown streaming behind her, and threw herself at the wagon. Her fingers found the wooden slats, splinters driving under her nails as she hauled herself up and over. She landed hard on something that felt like sacks of grain, biting back a cry of pain, and immediately began burrowing beneath the furs. The smell hit her first, leather and pine and something wild, something that made her chest ache with an emotion she couldn't name. She pulled the heavy pelts over herself, curling into the smallest ball possible, and held her breath. The wagon didn't stop. The guards didn't shout. The convoy rolled on, carrying her away from Silver Creek, away from Marcus, away from everything she'd ever known. Elara closed her eyes and let herself breathe. She must have slept. One moment she was lying rigid beneath the furs, counting her heartbeats, and the next she was drifting in a darkness that felt almost peaceful. Her dreams were strange, fragmented. Things, flashes of golden light, the sensation of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. She dreamed of a voice, deep and resonant, saying her name like a prayer. When she woke, the wagon had stopped moving. Night had fallen. She could tell by the quality of the darkness, the way the cold seeped through the furs and into her bones. Somewhere nearby, a fire crackled. Men's voices rose and fell in casual conversation. She'd made it. Relief flooded through her, so intense it nearly made her sob. She was outside Silver Creek territory. She was free. All she had to do was wait until the camp settled for the night, then slip away into the forest and disappear forever. She was still planning her escape when the furs were ripped away. Elara screamed, or tried to. The sound died in her throat as moonlight flooded her hiding spot, illuminating the figure looming above her. He was enormous. That was her first thought, absurd and inadequate. He stood at least 6.5 feet tall, his shoulders blocking out the stars, his body a wall of muscle barely contained by a simple black shirt. His hair was dark, almost black, falling in waves past his shoulders. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, shadowed with stubble. But it was his eyes that pinned her in place. They caught the firelight and threw it back, molten gold shot through with amber, burning with an intensity that made her want to bare her throat in submission. This was not a man. This was a predator. "What?" he said, his voice a low rumble that she felt in her bones. "Do we have here?" Elara's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She watched his nostrils flare, watched him breathe her in, and something shifted in his expression. The anger flickered, replaced by something else, something that looked almost like shock. "Who are you?" he demanded. Her voice cracked. She tried again. "I'm no one. Just a rogue. I was trying to. Don't lie to me." He leaned closer, and his scent washed over her, pine and leather and something electric, something that made every nerve ending in her body light up like she'd been struck by lightning. "I can smell the lie on you. You reek of Silver Creek. Of that pathetic excuse for an alpha." She flinched at the mention of Marcus, and his eyes narrowed. "You're running from something." It wasn't a question. From someone. "Please." The word tore from her before she could stop it. "Please, I'll leave, I'll go, just let me. You're a trespasser in a royal convoy." His voice was flat, utterly without mercy. "The penalty is death." Elara felt the blood drain from her face. So this was how it ended. Not as Marcus's broodmare, but as a corpse in the wilderness, executed by the Alpha King himself. She supposed there were worse fates. At least it would be quick. She lifted her chin, meeting those burning gold eyes with what little pride she had left. "Then do it." Something flickered in his gaze. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Then he inhaled again, deeper this time, and his entire body went rigid. Elara watched the change happen in real time. Watched his pupils blow wide, consuming the gold until only a thin ring remained. Watched his hands curl into fists at his sides, tendons standing out in sharp relief. Watched his chest heave with a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his lungs. No, he whispered. And then his eyes flashed, not gold but pure silver, his wolf surging to the surface with a force that made the air itself shudder. It's not possible. His voice had dropped an octave, rough and ragged, barely human. You can't be. He reached for her. Elara flinched back, but his hand closed around her wrist, and the moment their skin touched, something inside her cracked. Pain lanced through her, so intense she saw white. She heard herself screaming, distantly, as heat flooded her veins, as something ancient and powerful stirred in the depths of her soul, something that had been sleeping for 23 years. Through the haze of agony, she saw the Alpha King fall to his knees beside the wagon. She saw his face, stripped of all arrogance, all cruelty, transformed into something raw and vulnerable and utterly devastated. One word tore from his throat, rough with disbelief and something that sounded terrifyingly like reverence. Mate. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. Kaylin Blackwood had waited 15 years for this moment. 15 years of empty beds and emptier promises. 15 years of political marriages proposed and rejected, of simpering nobles parading their daughters before him like livestock at auction. 15 years of his wolf growing more restless, more feral, more convinced that their mate simply didn't exist. And now she was here. Covered in dirt and torn satin, smelling of fear and pine needles and something underneath it all that made his wolf howl with recognition. A runaway Omega hiding in his supply wagon like a common thief. His mate. Impossible. Let go of me. Her voice cut through the chaos in his mind, sharp and surprisingly steady for someone who just screamed loud enough to wake the dead. She was trying to pull her wrist from his grip, her small fingers scrabbling uselessly against his hold. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong. I'm not, I can't be. You felt it. He hadn't meant to say it. The words came out rough, accusatory. When I touched you. You felt it too. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, yes. But beneath that, a flash of something else. Recognition. I don't know what I felt. She yanked harder at her wrist. Some kind of trick, or... There is no trick. Kaylin forced himself to release her, though every instinct screamed against it. His wolf was clawing at the edges of his control, demanding he claim her, mark her, make sure she could never run again. He shoved the beast down with an effort that left him shaking. The mate bond cannot be fabricated. Then it's a mistake. She scrambled backward in the wagon, putting as much distance between them as the cramped space allowed. Her eyes were wide and wild, the color of storm clouds in the firelight. I'm an Omega who can't shift. I'm nobody. I'm defective. I can't possibly be mated to. She stopped. Swallowed hard. To the Alpha King, Kaylin finished. Your Majesty. A voice cut through the night, sharp with concern. Kaylin turned to find his beta, Marcus Drake, no relation to that bastard Thorn, thank the gods, approaching with his hand on his sword. We heard screaming. Is there a threat? Behind Drake, half a dozen royal guards had materialized, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness as their wolves rose to the surface. They were scanning the tree line, the wagons, searching for danger. Their gazes landed on Elara. A stowaway, one of them growled. In the supply wagon. Shall I remove her, Majesty? No. The word came out harder than Kaylin intended. He saw his men exchange glances, confusion flickering across their faces. They'd never heard him sound so raw. She stays. He rose to his full height, forcing his voice into something approximating calm. "She's under my protection until we reach the capital." "Your Majesty." "That's an order." Kalen's eyes swept across his guards, and one by one, they dropped their gazes. "Submitted. No one touches her. No one questions her. And no one speaks of her presence to anyone outside this convoy. Is that understood?" A chorus of reluctant assent. Drake waited until the guards had dispersed before stepping closer. His voice dropped to a murmur. "Kalen. What's going on?" Kalen looked back at the woman in the wagon. She'd drawn her knees to her chest, her arms wrapped around them, making herself as small as possible. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I intend to find out." They gave her a tent. It was small but private, set apart from the main camp and guarded by two of Kalen's most trusted men. They'd brought her water to wash with, a clean dress to replace the ruined wedding gown, and food that she'd barely touched. Elara sat on the narrow cot, staring at her hands. Her wrist still burned where he'd touched her. Not painfully, it was more like the echo of a flame, a lingering warmth that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. And deeper than that, in some part of herself she'd never known existed, something was stirring. Something that had been dormant her entire life. Mate. The word kept echoing in her mind, in his voice, rough with disbelief and something that had almost sounded like awe. It couldn't be real. The mate bond was sacred, rare, a gift from the moon goddess herself. It connected two souls destined for each other, creating a connection so profound that some bonded pairs could feel each other's emotions, read each other's thoughts. It was the stuff of legends and love stories. It was not something that happened to defective Omegas who couldn't even shift. And it certainly wasn't something that connected packless nobodies to the most powerful alpha in all the territories. The tent flap rustled. Elara's head snapped up, her body tensing for flight. Kalen Blackwood stepped inside. He'd changed since she'd last seen him. His hair was pulled back from his face now, tied at the nape of his neck with a leather cord. He'd traded his simple black shirt for something finer, though still dark, and a pendant hung at his throat, a silver wolf's head identical to the crest on his wagons. He looked every inch the king he was. Powerful. Untouchable. Terrifying. Elara rose to her feet on instinct, her head bowing before she could stop herself. "Don't." His voice was flat. "Look at me." She lifted her chin. Forced herself to meet those golden eyes. He studied her in silence for a long moment. She couldn't read his expression. Couldn't tell if he was angry, curious, or simply calculating how best to dispose of her. "Tell me your name," he said finally. "Elara." "Elara Vance." "And who are you running from, Elara Vance?" Her throat tightened. "Does it matter?" "It matters." He moved further into the tent, and she had to fight the urge to retreat. Not because she was afraid of him, though she was, desperately, but because his proximity was doing things to her body that she didn't understand. Making her skin prickle with awareness. Making her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "You were hours away from marrying someone. I could smell the intent on you. The fear. You were running from your own wedding." Elara's hands curled into fists at her sides. "How do you know that?" "The dress. The timing. The way you flinch every time I say the word wedding." He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'm not a fool, little wolf. Don't treat me like one." "I'm not a wolf," she snapped, the words escaping before she could stop them. "That's the whole point. I can't shift. I'm defective." "Yes, you've mentioned." Something flickered in his eyes. "Is that what they told you? Your pack?" "It's what I am. It's what you believe." He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "But the mate bond doesn't lie, Elara. It doesn't choose based on politics or bloodlines or the ability to shift. It chooses based on souls. And yours called to mind the moment I touched you. Her breath caught. I don't. I know. His voice softened, just slightly. You don't understand. Neither do I. But that doesn't make it less real. Silence stretched between them. Elara searched his face for deception, for cruelty, for any of the things she'd learned to expect from alphas. She found only an exhaustion that mirrored her own. Who were you running from? He asked again. I need to know, Elara. Because whoever he is, he's going to come looking for you. She closed her eyes. Alpha Marcus Thorne. Of the Silver Creek Pack. When she opened them again, Kalen's expression had gone cold. Not at her, she realized. His anger was directed elsewhere entirely. Marcus Thorne, he repeated slowly. The widower. Twice over. The words tasted bitter on her tongue. He bought me from my father. To breed. And when I heard him telling his beta that he'd dispose of me if I couldn't produce an heir, the same way he disposed of his first wife, I ran. Something dangerous flickered in Kalen's eyes. His wolf, she realized. Rising to the surface. He threatened you. He didn't know I was listening. But yes. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth radiating from him. I know what you're thinking. That I should have gone to my alpha. Reported what I heard. But Marcus is the alpha. And my father, she broke off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter. No one would have believed me anyway. I'm just a defective Omega. My word means nothing. For a long moment, Kalen said nothing. Then he moved, crossing the remaining distance between them in a single stride. Elara flinched, expecting violence. Instead, his hand came up to cup her chin, tilting her face toward his with a gentleness that stole her breath. Your word, he said quietly, means everything to me. She didn't sleep that night. She lay on the narrow cot, staring at the canvas ceiling, replaying every moment of their conversation in her mind. The way he'd looked at her. The way he'd touched her, so careful, as if she were something precious rather than something broken. Your word means everything to me. She didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know how to fit it into her understanding of the world. Alphas took what they wanted. They used Omegas until they were used up, then discarded them. That was the natural order. That was what she'd been taught her entire life. But Kalen hadn't taken anything. He hadn't demanded anything. He'd asked questions and listened to her answers like they actually mattered. It had to be a trick. Some kind of manipulation she was too naive to recognize. And yet, her wrist still burned. And deep in her chest, in that place where her wolf should have lived, something was definitely stirring. She pressed her hand over her heart, feeling the steady thrum beneath her palm. Feeling, for the first time in her life, like she wasn't entirely alone. The convoy resumed at dawn. Elara had expected to be thrown back into the supply wagon, but instead, a guard appeared at her tent with instructions to escort her to the Alpha King's personal carriage. She'd tried to refuse, and the guard had looked at her like she'd suggested jumping off a cliff. The king's orders, he'd said flatly. You ride with him. So now she was sitting across from Kalen Blackwood in a carriage that was larger than her childhood bedroom, watching the forest roll past through windows hung with black velvet curtains. Neither of them had spoken in over an hour. Elara stole glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. He had documents spread across his lap, reports of some kind, and he was reading through them with a focus that made her wonder if he'd forgotten she existed. She should have been grateful for the silence. Instead, she found herself growing restless. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Kalen looked up. Why what? Why am I here? She gestured at the carriage, the velvet, the guards she could hear riding alongside them. You could have killed me. You could have left me in the forest. You could have handed me back to Marcus. Instead, you're treating me like... Like what? I don't know. She shook her head, frustration bleeding into her voice. Like I matter. Something shifted in his expression. You're my mate, Alara. But I don't want to be. The words hung in the air between them. She watched hurt flash across his features before he could hide it, and felt an unexpected twist of guilt in her chest. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. His voice was carefully neutral. And I understand. You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me. The only alpha you've ever known tried to purchase you like livestock. He set his documents aside, giving her his full attention. I'm not asking you to accept the bond, Alara. I'm not asking you to accept anything. But I am asking you to give me time. Time for what? To prove that I'm not like him. His golden eyes held hers. To prove that you're safe with me. Alara wanted to argue. Wanted to point out that she'd heard pretty words from alphas before, and they'd all turned out to be lies. But there was something in his gaze, a sincerity she hadn't expected, hadn't prepared for, that made the words die in her throat. What happens when we reach the capital? She asked instead. You'll stay in the palace. I'll provide you with quarters, guards, whatever you need. As what? Your prisoner. As my guest. A hint of frustration crept into his voice. I know you don't believe me, but I have no intention of forcing you into anything. The mate bond is sacred. It's meant to be a gift, not a chain. And if I want to leave? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. If, after I've dealt with Marcus Thorne and you're truly safe, you still want to leave, I won't stop you. Alara blinked. You'd let me go? It would kill me. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. His jaw tightened. My wolf would never forgive me. But yes. If that's what you truly wanted, I would let you go. She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to reconcile this man with everything she'd been taught about alphas, about kings, about the wolves who held power over those weaker than themselves. So she said nothing. And after a moment, Kalen returned to his documents, and silence fell over the carriage once more. They stopped to rest the horses at midday. Alara climbed out of the carriage on shaking legs, grateful for the fresh air after hours in the confined space. The forest here was different from Silver Creek. The trees were taller, older, their bark covered in pale green lichen that made them look almost ghostly. She was studying a particularly massive oak when she felt him approach. You're not eating. Kalen's voice came from behind her. My men tell me you've barely touched the food they've brought you. I'm not hungry. You're lying. He moved to stand beside her, and she caught his scent on the breeze, pine and leather and that electric something that made her pulse quicken. I can hear your stomach growling from here. Alara felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's none of your concern. You're my mate. Everything about you is my concern. He reached into his coat and produced something wrapped in cloth. Here. Dried venison. Not exactly a feast, but it'll keep your strength up. She stared at the offering. At his hand, extended toward her, palm up, waiting. Why are you being kind to me? The question came out smaller than she intended. More vulnerable. Kalen's expression softened. Because you deserve kindness, Alara. Even if you don't believe it. She took the food. Their fingers brushed, and that spark ignited again, heat racing up her arm, settling in her chest, making that dormant something stir and stretch. There, he murmured, his eyes on her face. You felt that. She couldn't deny it. Not when her whole body was humming with awareness of him. It doesn't mean anything, she said weakly. It means everything. He stepped closer, and she forgot how to breathe. Your wolf is waking up, Alara. I don't know why you couldn't shift before, but the bond is changing something. Unlocking something. That's impossible. So is finding my mate hiding in a supply wagon, covered in dirt and wearing a wedding dress meant for another man. His lips quirked. And yet here we are. Despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the chaos of the past 24 hours, Elara felt something unexpected bubble up in her chest. She almost laughed. Kalen's eyes widened slightly, as if he could sense the shift in her mood. Was that almost a smile? No. It was. I saw it. Something warm flickered in his gaze. You should do that more often. Smile. I don't have much to smile about. Not yet. He held her gaze. But you will. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Elara didn't have words for. She became acutely aware of how close he was standing, how easy it would be to close the remaining distance, how much she wanted. Your Majesty. They both turned. Drake was approaching, his expression troubled, and Elara felt the tension shift immediately. Something was wrong. What is it? Kalen's voice had gone hard, the softness of the past few minutes evaporating like mist. I ran those inquiries you requested. Quietly, through our contacts in the Southern Territories. Drake's gaze flickered to Elara, then back to his king. About the girl's situation. And? Marcus Thorne is claiming she's his stolen property. He sent search parties to every pack within 100 miles. Drake's jaw tightened. He's also accusing her of theft. Says she stole wedding jewels worth a small fortune before she ran. The blood drained from Elara's face. That's a lie. I didn't take anything except the dress I was wearing. I believe you. Kalen's voice was calm, but his eyes had gone cold in a way that made her shiver. What else? There's more. Drake pulled something from his coat, a rolled piece of parchment. A messenger just arrived from Silver Creek. With this. He handed it to Kalen, who unrolled it slowly. Elara watched his face. Watched the cold fury settle into his features like ice forming over deep water. What does it say? She whispered. Without a word, Kalen turned the parchment toward her. It was a bounty poster. Her face stared back at her, a rough sketch, but recognizable enough. Beneath it, in bold black letters. Wanted for theft of royal property. Elara Vance. Reward, 10,000 gold pieces. Return to Alpha Marcus Thorne. Royal property, she breathed. He's claiming I belong to him. He's claiming a great deal more than that. Kalen's voice was low, dangerous. The stolen jewels are allegedly family heirlooms worth twice the bounty. If you're found with them, or without proof that you never had them, he has grounds to demand your execution under territorial law. Elara's knees went weak. She might have fallen if Kalen hadn't caught her, his arm wrapping around her waist, steadying her against his chest. He's framing me, she said. He's framing me so that even if I escape, I'll never be safe. He's trying to. Kalen's arm tightened around her. But he made one mistake. What? Kalen's eyes met hers, and she saw something burning there, not just anger, but a fierce, protective determination that stole her breath. He forgot, the Alpha King said softly, that you belong to me now. And I protect what's mine. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 3. The royal palace of Blackwood loomed against the twilight sky like a mountain given form and purpose. Elara pressed her face to the carriage window, her breath fogging the glass as she took in the massive structure. It was nothing like the pack house she'd grown up in, that had been large, yes, but rough-hewn, functional. This was something else entirely. Black stone towers clawed toward the heavens, their spires topped with silver that caught the dying light and threw it back like captured stars. The walls were ancient, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, but there was nothing crumbling about them. They looked as though they could withstand the end of the world. It's called the Obsidian Keep, Kalen said from across the carriage. Built by my ancestors during the First War, when the territories were still fractured. It's terrifying. She hadn't meant to say it out loud. But something about the building made her chest tight, made her feel small and insignificant in a way that Silver Creek never had. Kalen's lips quirked. Most people say, impressive. Most people are liars. A surprised laugh escaped him, a real one, warm and unguarded. Elara felt something flutter in her chest at the sound. Fair enough. He leaned forward, his golden eyes catching the last rays of sunlight. It can be both, you know. Terrifying and impressive. Most powerful things are. The carriage rolled through the main gates, and Elara lost the ability to respond. The courtyard was full of people, servants in crisp uniforms, guards in black armor, nobles in silk and velvet who turned to watch the royal convoy's arrival with undisguised curiosity. She saw their gazes land on the king's carriage, saw them tracking the movement behind the windows, trying to glimpse who rode beside him. They're going to talk, she said quietly. They always talk. Kalen's voice hardened slightly. Let them. The quarters he gave her were larger than her father's entire house. Elara stood in the center of the receiving room, turning slowly, trying to take it all in. Vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of wolves running beneath a silver moon. Windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, overlooking a garden that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Furniture that looked like it cost more than everything she'd ever owned combined. These are the guest quarters of the eastern wing, Kalen said from the doorway. You'll have your own servants, your own guards. No one enters without your permission, not even me. She turned to face him. And what will you tell people? About who I am? The truth. Part of it, anyway. He stepped into the room, and she was struck again by how he seemed to fill any space he occupied. You're a political refugee from Silver Creek, under Crown protection while I investigate allegations of misconduct by Alpha Thorn. That's not the truth. It's not a lie, either. His eyes met hers. Everything I do from this point forward must be calculated, Elara. If I claim you as my mate publicly, before I have proof of Thorn's crimes, it will look like I'm using the bond as an excuse to steal another Alpha's property. Half the territory lords would side with him out of fear that I might do the same to them. Property. The word made her stomach turn. And if they find out what I really am? What happens then? They won't. Not until we're ready. He moved closer, and she felt that pull again, the bond tugging at something deep in her chest, urging her toward him. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you didn't ask for any of this. But I need you to trust me, just for a little while. Can you do that? Trust. Such a small word for such an impossible request. But when she looked into his eyes, those golden depths that held something she couldn't quite name, she found herself nodding anyway. For a little while, she said. But don't make me regret it. The court was worse than she'd imagined. In the 3 days since her arrival, Elara had learned several things about palace life. First, that servants talked, constantly, incessantly, about everything and everyone. Second, that nobles were even worse, hiding their cruelty behind silk smiles and honeyed words. And third, that being a political refugee under the king's protection made her a target for every ambitious lord and lady who wanted to curry favor by putting her in her place. She was crossing the main hall, trying to reach the library Kalen had mentioned, when she heard the whispers start. That's her. The packless one. I heard she was a servant. Can you imagine? Why would the king waste resources protecting someone so common? Elara kept her eyes forward, her spine straight. She'd endured worse in Silver Creek. Words couldn't hurt her. Perhaps she's providing other services. The voice was louder now, clearly meant to be heard. Elara's steps faltered. What do you think, Lady Mira? A man's voice, smooth and poisonous. Could our noble king have developed a taste for gutter trash? Laughter, high and cruel. Elara's hands curled into fists at her sides. She could feel heat rising in her chest, something volatile and dangerous pressing against her ribs. Keep walking. Don't engage. Don't give them the satisfaction. She was almost to the library doors when a figure stepped into her path. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and pale eyes that reminded her of frozen water. His clothes were immaculate, black velvet trimmed with silver, a signet ring glittering on his finger. He smiled at her, and there was nothing warm in it. "You must be the king's little charity case," he said. "I'm Lord Darius Blackwood, the king's cousin." Elara forced herself to meet his gaze. "Excuse me. I was just fleeing, yes. I noticed." He didn't move. "It must be so overwhelming for you, being surrounded by your betters. Tell me, in your old pack, did they let you eat at the table? Or did you take your meals on the floor with the other animals?" More laughter from the gathering crowd. Elara felt her face flush with humiliation. "I don't want any trouble," she said quietly. "Of course you don't. Your kind never does." Darius leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But trouble is exactly what you've brought, little Omega. The king might be taken with you now, but his fascination will fade. And when it does, you'll be right back where you belong, on your knees, serving your betters." The heat in her chest was building now, pressing against her control, demanding release. She could feel something stirring beneath her skin, something that had never stirred before. "Let me pass," she said. "Please." "Oh," she begs. Darius straightened, addressing the crowd with theatrical delight. "How fitting. Tell me, is that how you convinced the king to take you in? On your knees, begging like the—" "That's enough, Darius." The new voice cut through the hall like a blade. Elara turned to see a young woman striding toward them, her dark hair streaming behind her, her golden eyes blazing with fury. She was beautiful in the sharp, dangerous way of all the Blackwoods, but there was warmth beneath her anger, a righteous fire that had nothing to do with cruelty. "Sister." Darius's smile didn't waver. "I was just welcoming our guest. You were being an ass." The woman stopped beside Elara, positioning herself like a shield. "Which isn't surprising, given that it's your natural state. But I'd hoped you might manage basic courtesy for at least a week." "I was simply—" "I don't care." Her voice could have frozen the sun. "Walk away, Darius. Now. Before I tell my brother exactly how you've been spending your time." Something flickered in Darius's pale eyes. Fear, quickly hidden. He sketched an mocking bow, his gaze lingering on Elara with undisguised contempt. "Another time, then," he said, and melted into the crowd. The woman turned to Elara, her expression softening. "Are you all right?" Yes. Thank you." Elara realized her hands were shaking. "You're the king's sister. Princess Sarah Blackwood, at your service." She grinned, and the resemblance to Kaylin was suddenly striking, not just the coloring, but the unexpected warmth beneath the sharp edges. Also known as the family disappointment, the unmarried scandal, and the pain in Kaylin's ass. Pick whichever title you prefer. Despite everything, Elara felt herself smile. "I think I like the last one." "Everyone does." Sarah linked her arm through Elara's, steering her toward the library doors. "Come on. I'll show you where the good books are hidden, and you can tell me how a political refugee from Silver Creek ended up making my cousin foam at the mouth." Sarah, Elara discovered, was nothing like the other nobles. She was 20 years old, wickedly smart, and completely uninterested in the political games that consumed the rest of the court. She'd been engaged 3 times, broken it off each time, and seemed to consider the resulting scandals more amusing than shameful. "Kaylin hates it," she said cheerfully, curled up in a library chair with a book in her lap. "He keeps telling me I'm going to start a war if I reject another suitor. I keep telling him that any man I can outsmart on the first date doesn't deserve a second." "That sounds liberating." "It is." Sarah's eyes softened. "But I have the luxury of being difficult. I'm a princess with an army to protect me." "You." She trailed off, her gaze assessing. "You've never had that, have you?" "No." Elara stared at her hands. "I've never had much of anything." "Well, you have something now." Sarah leaned forward. I don't know what my brothers told you, and I don't need to know. But I recognize the look in his eyes when he talks about you. He's not just protecting you because you're a political asset. He's protecting you because he cares. He barely knows me. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sarah smiled. Kaylan's been alone a long time. Longer than most people realize. If you've given him a reason to hope, don't take that away from him lightly. The days that followed were a strange kind of purgatory. Elara spent her mornings in the library with Sarah, her afternoons exploring the palace grounds, and her evenings trying to ignore the pull that drew her toward Kaylan's quarters like a compass pointing north. The bond was growing stronger, she could feel it now, a constant hum beneath her skin, a warmth in her chest that flared whenever he was near. She tried to resist it. Tried to remind herself that she'd sworn never to belong to another alpha, never to be someone's possession again. But Kaylan made it difficult. He didn't push. Didn't demand. He simply appeared. At breakfast, with a book he thought she might enjoy. In the gardens, walking beside her in comfortable silence. At dinner, where he placed her at his right hand and glared down anyone who dared whisper. He defended her without making her feel weak. Protected her without making her feel caged. And slowly, despite her best efforts, she found herself wondering if maybe, just maybe, this could be different. You're staring again, Sarah said one afternoon, catching Elara's gaze lingering on Kaylan across the courtyard. I am not. You absolutely are. Sarah grinned. It's disgusting. You're both disgusting. Just kiss already and put the rest of us out of our misery. It's not that simple. It never is. Sarah's expression sobered. But sometimes the complicated things are worth fighting for. The confrontation came on the 7th day. There was a formal dinner, some diplomatic function that required Elara's presence as a symbol of the king's benevolence toward refugees. She'd worn one of the dresses Kaylan had commissioned for her, deep blue silk that made her feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. She'd made it through the meal without incident. Made it through the toasts and the speeches and the endless parade of nobles who looked at her like she was something they'd scraped off their shoes. She was almost back to her quarters when Darius intercepted her. Running away again, little Omega? He stepped out of the shadows, blocking her path. The night is young. Stay. Entertain us. I'm tired. She tried to step around him. Excuse me. No. His hand shot out, closing around her arm. I don't think I will. Pain lanced through her where he gripped, and something inside her snapped. Let go of me. Or what? He laughed, cruel and dismissive. You'll cry to the king? Tell him the mean lord was rude to you? He leaned closer, his breath hot on her face. You're nothing. A defective Omega whore who spread her legs for protection. Everyone knows it. The only reason Kaylan keeps you around is because he hasn't gotten bored yet. The heat was back, roaring now, a wildfire consuming her from the inside out. Elara felt something shift beneath her skin, something ancient and powerful and utterly terrifying. I said, she growled, and her voice came out wrong, deeper, resonant with something that wasn't entirely human, let go. Darius's eyes went wide. He released her arm, stumbling backward. What? The shift took her like a wave. There was no warning, no gradual transformation. One moment she was human, trembling with rage and fear, and the next she was other. Pain exploded through her body, bones breaking, reforming, muscles tearing and reknitting themselves in patterns that shouldn't have been possible. She heard herself scream, heard it transform into a howl that shook the walls. And then she was standing on 4 legs, her claws digging into stone, her vision sharper than it had ever been. She could smell Darius's fear, a sour stench that made her lip curl. Could hear footsteps pounding toward them, shouts of alarm echoing through the halls. She turned, catching her reflection in a darkened window. Her wolf was massive, larger than any Omega should be, nearly the size of an alpha. Her fur was silver, pure and gleaming like moonlight given form. But it was the markings that made her breath catch. Swirling patterns covered her coat, darker silver against light, forming shapes that looked almost like runes. They seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "What am I?" "Moon blessed." The whisper came from behind her. Elara turned to find Kaelan standing in the corridor, his face pale, his golden eyes filled with something that looked like awe. "That's impossible," Darius breathed. "The moon blessed died out centuries ago." "Apparently not." Kaelan moved toward her slowly, his hands raised, palms out. "Elara. Can you hear me?" She whined, the sound strange in her new throat. She could hear him, could hear everything, the thunder of his heartbeat, the whisper of his breath, the rustle of silk as servants fled in terror. But she couldn't make her body respond the way she wanted. "It's all right." He was close now, close enough to touch. "You're safe. I've got you. Just breathe." His hand came up, hovering near her muzzle. She should have flinched away. Should have snarled, snapped, defended herself the way she'd been doing her whole life. Instead, she pressed her massive head into his palm and let herself be held. The shift back was easier than she'd expected. One moment she was wolf, the next she was human, collapsed on the cold stone floor, naked and shaking. Kaelan was there immediately, wrapping his cloak around her, lifting her into his arms. "Everyone out," he commanded, and his voice was pure alpha, the kind of power that couldn't be disobeyed. Now. The hall emptied. Elara heard footsteps retreating, heard Sarah's voice demanding answers, heard Drake organizing guards with quiet efficiency. But all of it felt distant, muffled, like she was hearing it through water. "What happened to me?" she whispered. Kaelan's arms tightened around her. "Something miraculous. I don't understand." "Neither do I." "Not entirely." He was carrying her toward his quarters, she realized, not hers. And she was too exhausted to protest. The moon blessed were an ancient bloodline. The first wolves, some say. They had powers beyond normal shifters, healing, foresight, the ability to strengthen entire packs just by existing. They were the reason the original Alpha Kings rose to power. But they were hunted to extinction during the Blood Wars, centuries ago. And I'm one of them. Somehow. He shouldered open a door, carrying her into a room that smelled like him, pine and leather and that electric something that made her feel safe. Your wolf wasn't dormant, Elara. She was sleeping. Waiting. Maybe for the right trigger, or maybe for you, she finished. Their eyes met. In the firelight, his golden gaze was soft, wondering. Maybe, he said quietly. Maybe for me. In the shadows of the palace, Lord Darius Blackwood nursed his wounded pride and planned. The humiliation burned like acid in his chest. Bad enough to be snarled at by a packless nobody. Worse to witness her transformation, to see the ancient markings bloom across her coat like a prophecy made manifest. Moon blessed. He'd thought them a myth. A bedtime story used to frighten children and inspire loyalty to the Blackwood throne. But he'd seen her. Seen those silver markings glowing in the darkness. Seen the way his cousin looked at her, like she was the answer to every prayer he'd never spoken. If Kaelan claimed her, truly claimed her, mate bond and all, he would be unstoppable. A Blackwood king bonded to a moon-blessed Omega. The other territories would fall in line within months. The power structure that had kept the noble families balanced for generations would crumble. Darius would not allow that. He slipped through the servants' passages, avoiding the guards with practiced ease. The eastern gate was unmonitored at this hour, he'd made sure of it. The messenger was waiting for him in the shadow of the wall. A rough-looking man with the scent of Silver Creek on his clothes. "You're late," Darius said. Had to be careful. The man's eyes glittered in the darkness. Alpha Thorn doesn't take kindly to failure. Tell him I have information worth 10 times that bounty he posted. Darius smiled, cold and sharp. The Omega he's looking for isn't just a runaway bride. She's moon-blessed. The first one in 300 years. The messenger's breath caught. You're sure? I watched her shift myself. Darius pressed a sealed letter into the man's hands. Give this to your alpha. Tell him if he wants to claim what's his, he'd better move fast. The king is already falling for her. The messenger vanished into the night. Darius watched him go, satisfaction curling through his chest like smoke. Let his cousin play protector. Let him fall in love with his precious mate. It would make his destruction all the sweeter. The game had just begun. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The news spread faster than wildfire. Within 3 days of Alara's shift, every territory in the realm knew her name. Ravens carried messages through the mountain passes. Traders whispered in taverns and market squares. Pack runners crossed borders with breathless reports of the impossible, a moon-blessed wolf, alive, in the palace of the Alpha King. Alara watched the chaos unfold from her window, feeling like a stone dropped into still water, helpless to stop the ripple spreading outward. Another one. Sarah dropped a stack of letters onto the table, her expression caught between amusement and disgust. Alpha Crane of the Northern Peaks wants to offer you his eldest son. He's 17, apparently, and eager to serve the sacred bloodline. Alara's stomach turned. He's a child. He's also the 5th proposal this morning. Sarah collapsed into a chair, rubbing her temples. I've lost count of the alliance offers. The coastal packs want to negotiate trade rights in exchange for military support. The Eastern Confederacy is offering a seat on their council. The mountain clans sent an actual chest of gold. For what? For you. Sarah's golden eyes met hers, serious now. You're not a person to them, Alara. You're a prize. The first moon blessed in 3 centuries. Whoever controls you controls the future of the territories. The words hit like a physical blow. Alara turned back to the window, watching the guards patrol the courtyard below. There were twice as many as there had been last week. Kaelin had tripled her security after the shift, citing threats she wasn't allowed to know about. Protection, he called it. It felt a lot like another cage. She found him in the war room. The space was massive, dominated by a table carved from a single slab of obsidian, its surface covered with maps and markers representing troop movements. Kaelin stood at its head, Drake at his side, both of them studying a cluster of red tokens near the southern border. He looked up when she entered. Something flickered in his eyes, relief, maybe, or longing, before his expression smoothed into careful neutrality. Alara. You should be resting. I've been resting for 3 days. She moved toward the table, ignoring Drake's surprised look. What's happening? Kaelin hesitated. She saw him exchange a glance with his beta, some silent communication she couldn't read. Tell me, she said. Please. I'm tired of being kept in the dark. A long pause. Then Kaelin sighed, gesturing toward the southern border. Marcus Thorne, he said. He's mobilizing. Alara's blood went cold. Mobilizing? He's gathered supporters from 3 neighboring packs. At least 200 wolves, maybe more. Kaelin's jaw tightened. They're marching toward the capital. He's demanding a formal tribunal. A tribunal for what? For you. Drake's voice was flat, professional, but she caught the edge of anger beneath it. He's claiming you're still legally his property. That the marriage contract your father signed is binding under old pack law, and that the king has no right to harbor you without completing the terms of that contract. The room seemed to tilt. Alara gripped the edge of the table, steadying herself. He can't, that's not. He can. Kaelin moved around the table, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. The old laws are murky, deliberately so. They were written in a time when Omegas had no rights, when they were traded like cattle. I've spent years trying to reform them, but progress is slow. The traditionalist packs resist any change. So he can just take me back. Not if I claim you first. The words hung in the air between them. Alara's heart stuttered. What? The mate bond supersedes all other claims. Kaelin's golden eyes held hers, intense and searching. If I publicly declare you as my fated mate, Marcus has no legal standing. You become part of the royal pack, under my protection, beyond anyone's reach. You do that? The question came out smaller than she intended. You'd claim me? In front of everyone? I would claim you in front of the gods themselves if it meant keeping you safe. She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly it ached. But the doubt was there, coiled in her chest like a snake, whispering all the things she'd learned to fear. Is that why? She asked quietly. Because you want to keep me safe? Or because the moon blessed would make a valuable political asset? Something flickered across his face. Hurt, quickly hidden. You think I care about politics? His voice was rough. You think I've spent the last 2 weeks watching you bloom into something extraordinary because I want to use you? I don't know what to think. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. I've never had anyone want me for me. It was always about what I could provide. What I could produce. And now, suddenly, I'm valuable. More valuable than I've ever been. How am I supposed to know if my feelings are real? He stepped closer, and she felt the bond flare between them, that electric pull that grew stronger every day. Look at me, Alara. She lifted her eyes. I knew you were my mate before you shifted, he said. I knew it when you were covered in dirt, hiding in my supply wagon, ready to fight me despite being terrified. I knew it when you stood up to me, when you challenged me, when you refused to cower even though every instinct told you to run. His hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. I don't want the moon blessed. I want you. The woman who survived things that should have broken her. The woman who makes me laugh, who makes me hope, who makes me feel like maybe I'm not destined to be alone. Tears burned behind her eyes. Kaelin. Tell me you don't feel it. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Tell me the bond means nothing to you. Tell me you feel nothing when I touch you, and I'll step back. I'll find another way to protect you. I won't force you into anything you don't want. She should say it. Should push him away, protect herself, keep her walls intact. But she was so tired of walls. I feel it, she whispered. I feel everything. His forehead dropped to hers, and for a long moment, they just breathed together. Then trust me, he said. Let me claim you. Let me show them, show everyone, that you're mine. Not because of what you are, but because of who you are. She closed her eyes. Made a choice. Okay. The claiming ceremony was held at dawn. The entire court gathered in the great hall, nobles and servants alike crowding the space to witness the impossible, their king, who had rejected every political match for 15 years, finally taking a mate. And not just any mate. The moon blessed. Alara stood before them in a gown of silver silk, her hair loose around her shoulders, the ancient markings visible on her skin where the dress left it bare. She discovered, in the days since her shift, that the marks didn't disappear when she was human. They'd faded to something like scars, silver against her pale skin, but they were always there. A permanent reminder of what she'd become. Kaelin faced her, dressed in black as always, but with a ceremonial cloak across his shoulders bearing the Blackwood crest. His eyes never left hers as the pack elder spoke the ancient words. Who claims this Omega as mate? I do. His voice rang through the hall. Kaelin Blackwood, Alpha King of the Territories. I claim Alara Vance as my fated mate, my partner, my equal in all things. And who accepts this claim? She'd been afraid her voice would shake. It didn't. I do. She reached out, taking his hands, feeling the bond pulse between them like a living thing. I accept Kalen Blackwood as my fated mate. I choose him, now and always. The elder smiled. Then let no wolf challenge what the gods have joined. This bond is sacred. This bond is law. Kalen pulled her close and kissed her. The hall erupted in cheers, some genuine, some forced, some conspicuously absent. But Alara barely heard them. She was lost in the feeling of his lips on hers, the rightness of being in his arms, the overwhelming sense that maybe, finally, she'd found where she belonged. When they broke apart, she was smiling. Actually smiling. Was that so terrible? Kalen murmured against her hair. Ask me again tomorrow. He laughed, the sound warm and private, just for her. Behind them, in the shadows of the great hall, Lord Darius Blackwood watched with cold fury burning in his pale eyes. The tribunal came 3 days later. Marcus Thorne arrived with an army at his back, not soldiers, technically, but supporters. 200 wolves from allied packs, all of them gathered outside the capital's walls like a storm waiting to break. He can't bring them inside, Drake reported. Not without violating territorial law. But he's demanding an audience. Formal proceedings. He says he has evidence that the king's claim is invalid. Alara sat in Kalen's private study, her hands twisted in her lap. The happiness of the claiming ceremony had faded, replaced by a dread that grew heavier with every passing hour. What kind of evidence? He hasn't said. Kalen paced by the window, his shoulders tight with tension. But he's confident. Too confident. He knows something we don't. Then we find out what. Sarah was perched on the arm of a chair, her expression fierce. Call his bluff. Grant the audience. Make him show his cards. And if his cards are better than ours? They won't be. Kalen turned to face them, his jaw set. The mate bond is sacred. No contract, no old law, can supersede it. Marcus is grasping at straws. But Alara saw the uncertainty in his eyes. The fear he was trying to hide. She loved him for trying to protect her. But she was done hiding from her past. Grant the audience, she said. I want to face him. The throne room had never felt so large. Alara stood beside Kalen's throne, dressed in Blackwood black, her silver markings visible at her wrists and throat. She was officially Pack now, officially queen, though no one had used that word yet. She could feel the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her, nobles and witnesses gathered to watch the spectacle. Marcus Thorne entered with the confidence of a man who'd already won. He was older than she remembered. Grayer. But his eyes were the same, cold and calculating, the eyes of a predator assessing prey. He smiled when he saw her, and she had to fight not to flinch. Your Majesty. He bowed, just deeply enough to be technically respectful. Thank you for granting this audience. You demanded it. Kalen's voice was ice. Let's not pretend otherwise. State your business, Thorne, and be done with it. Very well. Marcus straightened, his smile widening. I'm here to reclaim my property. Alara is not your property. She is my mate, claimed before witnesses, bound by the sacred laws of our kind. Ah, yes. The mate bond. Marcus waved a dismissive hand. Convenient, isn't it? That you discovered this bond only after learning what she truly was. The first moon blessed in 3 centuries, and she just happens to be your fated mate? Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alara felt her heart rate spike. The bond cannot be fabricated, Kalen said. You know this. I know what I've been told. But I also know that powerful alphas have ways of persuading weak-minded omegas. Making them believe things that aren't true. Marcus's pale eyes slid to Alara, gleaming with malice. Perhaps she's been manipulated. Perhaps she doesn't truly understand what she's agreed to. I understand perfectly. Alara's voice cut through the whispers, stronger than she'd expected. I chose Kaylin freely. No one manipulated me. Is that so? Marcus reached into his coat, producing a rolled document. Then perhaps you can explain this. A legal contract, signed by your father, selling your marriage rights to me for the sum of 50,000 gold pieces. Valid, binding, and witnessed by 3 pack elders. He tossed the document to a waiting servant, who carried it to the throne. Kaylin unrolled it, his expression hardening as he read. This contract is void, he said. The mate bond supersedes all other claims. Does it? Marcus smiled like a cat with a mouse. The contract includes a specific clause. If the bride attempts to flee before the wedding, she forfeits all rights to contest the arrangement. She becomes, legally, the property of her purchaser until the marriage is completed or formally dissolved. He spread his hands. Your mate fled my wedding, Your Majesty. By her own choice. She is mine until I release her, and I have no intention of doing so. The throne room erupted. Elara heard shouting, arguments, the pound of guards calling for order. But it all seemed distant, muffled by the roaring in her ears. Property. I'm property. Still, always, forever. Silence. Kaylin's alpha command cut through the chaos. The room fell still. This is absurd. You cannot seriously expect. I expect the law to be upheld. Marcus's voice was calm, reasonable, the voice of a man who held all the cards. But I'm not unreasonable. I understand the king has developed feelings for my bride. I'm willing to negotiate. Pay her bride price, 100,000 gold pieces, given the circumstances, and I'll release her from the contract. Or, if that sum is too steep, there's another option. What option? Her father can testify to her mental state. Marcus gestured toward the doors. I've brought him with me. Let him speak. Let him tell the court what his daughter is truly like. And let the court decide whether the king's claim is valid, or whether he's been deceived by a damaged, delusional Omega desperate to escape her lawful husband. The doors swung open. Elara's breath stopped. Her father walked into the throne room. He looked the same. That was the worst part. The same stooped shoulders, the same watery eyes, the same weak chin she'd inherited. He'd aged since she'd seen him last, but not much. Not enough. Papa. The word escaped before she could stop it. A child's word, full of hope she hadn't earned. He didn't look at her. I am Thomas Vance, he said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. Father of Elara Vance. I'm here to testify about my daughter's condition. Proceed. The pack elder who'd performed the claiming ceremony now sat in judgment, his expression troubled. What would you have us know? Thomas cleared his throat. Finally, his eyes found hers. There was nothing in them. No love, no regret, no shame. Just empty resignation. My daughter has always been troubled, he said. Since childhood, she's suffered from delusions. Fantasies. She imagines things that aren't real, sees enemies where there are none. I sold her to Alpha Thorn not for gold, but for her own protection. He promised to give her the care she needed. The structure. The discipline. No. The word tore from Elara's throat. That's not true. Papa, tell them the truth, tell them. You see how she is. Thomas spread his hands, appealing to the court. Hysterical. Irrational. She's always been this way. The mate bond she claims to share with the king, it's another delusion. Another fantasy. She's a sick girl who needs help, not a queen who should rule beside an alpha. The murmurs were back, louder now. Elara saw doubt on faces that had smiled at her during the claiming ceremony. Saw suspicion where there had been acceptance. You're lying. She was shaking, her wolf clawing at the edges of her control. You sold me because you owed Marcus money. You sold me like livestock. And now he's paid you to. Enough. Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. The poor girl is clearly distressed. This is exactly what I feared. Your Majesty, surely you can see now that she's not in her right mind. Let me take her home. Let me give her the care she needs. You will not touch her. Kalen was on his feet, his eyes blazing gold, his wolf surging to the surface. She is my mate. She is my queen. And anyone who tries to take her from me will die where they stand. Bold words. Marcus didn't flinch. But the law is clear. Until her bride price is paid or her father withdraws his testimony, she remains legally mine. Challenge that, and you challenge the foundations of pack law itself. How many allies do you think will stand with a king who ignores tradition whenever it suits him? Silence. Elara saw the trap closing around them. Saw Kalen's frustration, his helpless rage, his desperate search for a way out. She saw the moment he realized there wasn't one. I'll pay the bride price, he said finally, the words ground out through clenched teeth. 100,000 gold pieces. Give me 3 days to. I'm afraid I can't wait 3 days. Marcus smiled, cold and triumphant. But don't worry. I'm sure we can work something out. The doors burst open. Guards poured in, not palace guards, Elara realized with a jolt of terror, but men wearing Silver Creek colors beneath stolen armor. They moved with military precision, cutting through the crowd, heading straight for the throne. What is this? Kalen roared. Insurance. Marcus's smile widened. I've learned not to trust the good faith of kings. Something pricked Elara's neck. She spun, catching a glimpse of pale eyes and dark hair before the world went blurry. Darius. Darius with an empty syringe in his hand, his expression carefully blank. Cousin, he said softly. Apologies. The floor rushed up to meet her. She woke to darkness and the rattle of chains. Her head was pounding, her mouth dry, her body aching in ways she couldn't identify. She tried to move and found her wrists bound, cold iron biting into her skin. Chains. I'm in chains. Panic clawed at her throat. She thrashed, pulling against the bonds, but they held fast. The movement made her aware of her surroundings. She was in a carriage, the floor vibrating beneath her as wheels churned over rough road. Ah. You're awake. The voice came from the shadows. Elara's eyes adjusted slowly, and the figure across from her resolved into a nightmare she'd hoped never to see again. Marcus Thorne leaned forward, his cold eyes gleaming in the darkness. Did you really think you could escape me? He asked softly. Did you really think your precious king could protect you from what you are? Kalen will come for me. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. He'll find me. He'll try. Marcus shrugged. And he'll fail. By the time he realizes what's happened, we'll be across the border. In my territory. Under my law. He reached out, trailing one finger down her cheek. She flinched away. You should have stayed, little Omega. Should have accepted your place. Now I'll have to teach you what happens to brides who run. The carriage rattled on, carrying her deeper into the darkness. They reached Silver Creek at dawn. Elara was dragged from the carriage, her legs too weak to support her, her wrists rubbed raw by the chains. The pack house loomed before her, the place she'd fled, the place she'd sworn never to return to. Marcus's guards surrounded her, their faces hard and pitiless. Take her to the ceremonial chamber, Marcus ordered. Prepare her for the wedding. No. She tried to fight, tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The drug was still in her system, turning her limbs to water. No, please. No one listened. They stripped her and bathed her and dressed her in white. They bound her hair with silver ribbons and painted her lips red. They made her beautiful, like a sacrifice being prepared for slaughter. And then they brought her to him. The ceremonial chamber was draped in black and silver, candles flickering on every surface. An altar stood at its center, ancient runes carved into its surface, a ceremonial knife laid across it like a promise. Marcus stood before the altar in full ceremonial dress, his smile wide and terrible. "The wedding continues tonight," he said, lifting the knife to examine its blade. "And this time, little Omega, there's nowhere left to run." If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. Kalen rode like death itself was chasing him. His elite warriors thundered behind him, 200 of the finest wolves in the realm, their horses foaming at the mouth as they pushed through the night. The border to Silver Creek territory was still hours away, and every minute that passed felt like a knife twisting in his chest. "Hold on, Alara. Hold on." The mate bond pulsed between them, faint but present, a thread of light in the darkness that told him she was still alive. Still fighting. But he could feel her fear bleeding through, her desperation, her rage. And beneath it all, something else. Something ancient stirring to life. "Your Majesty." Drake pulled alongside him, his face grim. "The scouts report Silver Creek's borders are heavily defended. Marcus has called in his allies. We'll be outnumbered 3-1. I don't care. Kalen. I don't care if we're outnumbered 10-1. He turned to his beta, and Drake flinched at whatever he saw in his king's eyes. "She is my mate. She is my queen. And I will burn every territory between here and Silver Creek to the ground before I let that monster touch her." Drake nodded slowly. "Then we ride faster." They rode. In Silver Creek, torches blazed against the night sky. The pack had gathered in the great hall, hundreds of wolves crowded into the space, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. Some looked eager, hungry for the spectacle they'd been promised. Others looked uneasy, uncertain. A few, near the back, looked openly afraid. Alara stood before them all, her wrists still bound in iron, her white wedding gown trailing across the stone floor like a shroud. 2 guards flanked her, their grips bruising on her arms. Marcus waited at the altar, resplendent in ceremonial black, the curved knife gleaming in his hand. The blade was ancient, its edge stained dark with old blood. It was the knife used for forced mating bonds, a brutal tradition from a brutal time, when alphas claimed omegas whether they consented or not. "Bring her forward," Marcus commanded. The guards dragged her toward the altar. Alara's legs wouldn't cooperate, the drug was still heavy in her system, turning her muscles to water. But her mind was clear. Sharper than it had ever been. Not again. Never again. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless and furious. The beast had been awake for days now, prowling the edges of her consciousness, waiting. Watching. Alara had kept her contained, afraid of what might happen if she let go. She wasn't afraid anymore. "Tonight, we complete what should have been finished weeks ago." Marcus's voice rang through the hall, pitched to Carrie. "Tonight, I claim my bride. Tonight, the Silver Creek pack welcomes its new Luna." Silence. Then, scattered applause from his most loyal supporters. Marcus smiled, reaching out to grip Alara's chin, forcing her face up to meet his eyes. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble, little Omega. Running off. Hiding with that Blackwood bastard. Making me chase you across the realm." His fingers tightened, nails biting into her skin. "But that's over now. You're home. And you're going to learn your place." Alara said nothing. Her wolf was rising now, pressing against her control, heat building in her veins like magma seeking release. Wait. Wait for the right moment. Marcus lifted the ceremonial knife, displaying it to the crowd. The old ways are sacred. A mate bond forged in blood, witnessed by the pack, cannot be broken. Not even by kings. He turned back to Alara, pressing the blade against her throat. "Any last words, bride?" She met his eyes. Found her voice. "My mother had last words too." Before you killed her. The hall went still. Marcus's smile faltered. Just for a moment. Just long enough. What did you say? You heard me. Ilara's voice was steady now, carrying through the silence like a blade. You knew what I was. What I would become. Because you knew what she was, what she refused to give you. So you killed her. And you waited. Years and years, watching me, waiting for my power to manifest. Waiting until you could take from me what she denied you. Silence. Marcus's composure cracked, rage bleeding through. You know nothing. I know everything. And suddenly, she did. The memories were flooding through her now, images that didn't belong to her, visions inherited through blood and bone. Her mother, silver-haired and beautiful, standing against a younger Marcus with fire in her eyes. Her mother's voice, echoing across years, you will never have me. You will never have her. We are moon-blessed, and we bow to no one. Her mother's blood, spreading across this very floor. Marcus standing over her body, the ceremonial knife in his hand, red from blade to hilt. You murdered her, Ilara breathed. Here. In this hall. And you made my father watch. That's why he is the way he is. That's why he sold me to you, because you threatened to kill me too if he didn't. Marcus's face contorted with fury. He raised the knife, preparing to strike. Your mother's blood is on my hands, he snarled. Now I'll have what she denied me. The blade descended. And Ilara's wolf exploded free. The light was blinding. It burst from her like the sun being born, silver and white and burning with a power that had been sleeping for 300 years. The chains on her wrists shattered like glass. The guards flew backward, thrown by a force that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Ilara shifted. It was nothing like the first time, no pain, no confusion, no struggle for control. Her wolf surged to the surface with the ease of breathing, and suddenly she was standing on 4 legs, her massive silver form filling the space before the altar. The ancient markings blazed across her coat, pulsing with light, casting shadows that danced across the walls like living things. Marcus stumbled backward, his face pale with shock. Impossible, he breathed. You can't, the drug should have. Ilara's growl shook the rafters. Around her, wolves were dropping to their knees, their heads bowing, their throats baring in instinctive submission. The power rolling off her was ancient, primal, undeniable. It pressed against everyone in the hall like a physical force, demanding obedience. I am moon-blessed. I bow to no one. Marcus shifted, his gray wolf emerging with a snarl of defiance. He was large for an alpha, powerful in his own right, but compared to her, he was nothing. A candle flame standing against the sun. He lunged anyway. Ilara met him in midair. Her jaws closed around his throat, and she slammed him to the ground with a force that cracked the stone beneath them. He struggled, claws raking at her sides, but she held fast, her grip unbreakable. This is for my mother. She could kill him. It would be so easy, one twist of her head, and it would be over. Justice served, vengeance complete. But her mother's memories were still flowing through her, and she understood now that her power was meant for more than killing. The moon-blessed were protectors, not executioners. They were meant to unite the packs, not tear them apart. She released Marcus, stepping back, her silver form towering over his cowering wolf. Submit. The command resonated through the bond that connected all wolves, the ancient web of pack magic that the moon-blessed had once maintained. Marcus felt it, she could tell. His whole body shuddered with the effort of resistance. Submit, or die. His wolf collapsed. Throat bared, belly exposed. Complete, absolute submission. Around them, the hall erupted in chaos. The doors burst open. Kaelin's wolves poured in, 200 warriors in human and wolf form, cutting through Marcus's guards like water through sand. At their head came the Alpha King himself, shifted into his massive black wolf, his golden eyes blazing with murderous intent. He found Alara immediately. She felt the mate bond flare between them, felt his relief and rage and fierce, overwhelming love crash through her like a wave. You came. I will always come for you. He crossed the hall in 3 bounds, taking position at her side, his black fur pressing against her silver. Together, they faced the chaos, Marcus's allies scrambling to flee, his guards throwing down their weapons, his pack wolves howling in confusion and terror. The Alpha King, someone shouted. We're under attack. No. Alara shifted back to human form, standing tall and bare in the flickering torchlight, her markings glowing silver against her skin. You're being liberated. She turned to face the Silver Creek wolves, her voice carrying through the hall with a power that hadn't existed a week ago. Marcus Thorne murdered my mother, your Luna, 20 years ago. He framed my father, threatened to kill me, and used his power to terrorize this pack into submission. Tonight, that ends. She gestured to the cowering gray wolf behind her. He has submitted to me. His reign is over. And anyone who stands with him will face the same justice. Silence. Then, slowly, one by one, the Silver Creek wolves began to kneel. Not in submission to Kaelin, she realized. To her. The trial was swift. Marcus, forced back into human form and bound in silver chains, faced judgment before the combined packs. The evidence against him was overwhelming, decades of abuse, embezzlement, murder. Wolves who had been too afraid to speak came forward now, their testimonies painting a picture of cruelty that made even hardened warriors pale. Alara's father testified too. Thomas Vance stood before the assembly, trembling and gray, and finally told the truth. How Marcus had killed his wife. How he'd threatened their daughter. How the debt hadn't been gambling at all, but a fabrication Marcus used to control him. I sold my daughter to save her life, he said, his voice broken. And I testified against her to save it again. I know it doesn't matter. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want her to know, I never stopped loving her. Even when I was too weak to show it. Alara listened. She didn't forgive him, not yet, maybe not ever. But she understood now. And understanding was enough. Marcus's sentence was death. He faced it with the same cold arrogance he'd shown his whole life, refusing to beg or repent. His last words were for Alara, you think you've won, but you've just painted a target on your back. Every alpha in the realm will want to control you now. You'll never be safe. I know, she said. That's why I'm not running anymore. Kaelin's blade took his head. Lord Darius faced trial next. He'd been captured trying to flee the capital, dragged back in chains by Sarah herself. She'd tracked him for 2 days through mountain passes and back roads, her wolf relentless in pursuit of the cousin who'd betrayed them all. Treason, Sarah announced, throwing him before the assembled court. Conspiracy. Attempted murder. And being an insufferable prick for the past 30 years. That last one isn't technically a crime, Kaelin noted. It should be. Darius didn't grovel. He sneered and schemed and tried to bargain, offering information about Marcus's other allies in exchange for mercy. Kaelin listened to all of it, extracted what was useful, and sentenced him to life imprisonment in the deepest dungeons of the Obsidian Keep. You'll regret this, Darius hissed as the guards dragged him away. I'm your blood. Your family. You stopped being my family when you sold my mate to a monster. Kaelin's voice was ice. Be grateful I'm not taking your head. Thomas Vance's sentence was exile. Stripped of pack rights, banished from all territories, condemned to live as a rogue until his dying day. It was the harshest punishment short of death, and Alara had requested it herself. He doesn't deserve mercy, she told Kaelin privately. But I can't watch my father die. Not even after everything. Kaelin held her close and didn't argue. The ceremony was held at sunset. Not the forced wedding Marcus had planned, but something else entirely. Something new. Elara stood before the combined packs, Silver Creek and Blackwood united, the first step toward the alliance that would reshape the territories. She wore black and silver, the colors of both her bloodlines, her markings visible at her throat and wrists. A crown of silver and moonstone rested on her brow. Kaelin knelt before her. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the realm, on his knees. Waiting. The mate bond was made weeks ago, Elara said, her voice carrying across the assembly. But I never claimed it properly. I was too afraid. Too convinced that I was broken, that I didn't deserve love, that any happiness I found would be taken away. She reached down, cupping his face, tilting it up to meet her eyes. I'm not afraid anymore. She leaned down and sank her teeth into the mark she'd never given him. Kaelin's whole body shuddered as the bond completed, fully, finally, irrevocably. She felt it lock into place between them, a connection deeper than blood, stronger than magic. Two souls woven together until death and beyond. When she released him, his eyes were blazing gold. My mate, he breathed. My king. She pulled him to his feet, standing beside him as equals. My partner. My love. The howl started in Silver Creek and spread outward, carried by the wind across mountains and forests and plains. Every wolf in every territory lifted their voices to the moon. A queen had risen. And the realm would never be the same. 6 months later. Elara stood on the palace balcony, watching the sun set over the obsidian keep. The view had terrified her once. Now it felt like home. Kaelin's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. She leaned into him, savoring the warmth of his body, the steady pulse of the mate bond between them. The council meeting went well, he murmured against her hair. The Eastern Confederacy has officially signed the peace accord. The mountain clans are sending delegates next month. And the northern peaks. Let me guess. Alpha Crane is still trying to marry off his son. His daughter, now. Apparently, the boy found his own mate. Elara laughed. She did that often now, laughed. It still surprised her sometimes. Your Majesty. A servant appeared at the balcony entrance, bowing low. Forgive the interruption. A message has arrived from the Allied Council. Kaelin straightened, his expression shifting to the careful neutrality he wore in public. What message? The Allied packs have voted. The servant's voice trembled slightly, with awe or fear, Elara couldn't tell. They've elected Queen Elara as the new High Protector of the realm. Silence. Elara felt Kaelin's arms tighten around her. Felt his shock bleeding through the bond, followed quickly by fierce, overwhelming pride. The High Protector, she whispered. That title hasn't existed since. Since the moon blessed disappeared. Kaelin turned her to face him, his golden eyes soft with wonder. They're giving you a title from legend, Elara. A title that places you above every alpha in the realm. Including me. She searched his face for jealousy, for resentment, for any of the things she'd been taught to expect from powerful men. She found nothing but love. Does that bother you? Bother me? He laughed, pulling her close. I'm the king who gets to stand beside the most powerful wolf in history. I'm the mate of a queen who could bring every alpha to their knees with a thought. Why would that bother me? Because you're a man, and men are supposed to. Supposed to nothing. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. You are what I always knew you were. What everyone else was too blind to see. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that you chose me. Elara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back, but not before Kaelin caught them. What is it? His voice was gentle. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She shook her head, a laugh bubbling up through the tears. I spent my whole life being told I was broken. Defective. Worthless. And now you've become what everyone else was too afraid to see. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the moisture on her cheeks. A warrior. A queen. The protector of an entire realm. You were never broken, Alara. You were just waiting. Waiting for the right moment. The right person. The right supply wagon. He grinned. That too. She kissed him then, deep and slow, pouring everything she felt into the connection between them. The love. The gratitude. The wonder at how far she'd come from that terrified girl fleeing through a window in a stolen moment. She'd fled her wedding dressed in white. She'd found her destiny hiding in the back of a wagon. And she'd risen to claim a throne no one believed belonged to her. Below them, in the courtyards and the streets and the forests beyond, wolves howled in celebration. The sound carried across the kingdom, across territories and borders and ancient boundaries that were already beginning to fade. A new era had begun. And at its heart stood a queen who had finally learned the truth. She was never the curse they called her. She was the blessing they didn't deserve. But she would protect them anyway. Because that's what moon-blessed wolves do. The end. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you.